I was a weird kid. When my auntie and uncle asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said, a cross-country big-rig truck driver. The stereotype just didn't fit. I was blonde curls and a set of pink corduroy overalls that I wore everywhere. I played with Barbies, but my Barbies had pickup truck collections. There was a lot that was appealing to me about big-rig truck driving, but it really only boiled down to three main things. First of all, I couldn't fathom a more opposite landscape to the claustrophobic monotony of an 8 to 6 p.m. cubicle job than the expansive and ever-changing views of canyons, cornfields, mountain peaks, sunsets, and cityscapes that give the different states their identities. To get to see our country like that is a road trip some might feel blessed to have taken even once in their lifetime. And to get paid to watch the sunrise over miles of Kansas farmland, or scale snowy Colorado mountains without ever leaving the safety of my cab. Who wouldn't take that? Secondly, I can be a people person when I need to be, but I always truly preferred the company of my own thoughts against the superficial prattle of a summer Sunday barbecue, where the questions are so boring you can fall asleep in the middle of answering them. Every conversation I would have with people would sound exactly like each other's. Except for the ones I had with her. Somehow, none of our conversations were ever the same as the ones before. We were together for 4 years, and at one point talked every single day no matter where we were, and we never repeated a conversation. Natalie wasn't the first person I ever loved, but she was definitely the one I loved the most. She was the one that made me feel like I never needed to tailor my speech. She wanted to hear exactly what I was thinking, and what I was thinking was always accepted. She was the first girl I ever introduced to my family after I came out the year prior, as if the fleet of Barbie trucks didn't tip them off. I was always hesitant to push the envelope of what I was asking of my family to tolerate, but they loved her. Of course they would. She had the gift of being able to dish out specific and thoughtful compliments to everyone she'd ever meet, and every time they seemed unquestionably genuine. She was a devout atheist who didn't believe in God, heaven, or hell, so nowhere to go when you're gone but to one big sleep. It made her live selflessly, not caring to score brownie points towards her own eternal paradise, but to treat people in direct, instant demonstration of how every human alike should be treated and leave the planet better than when she came. I saw an actual future with her before she... Natalie was also the only person who understood my unconventional dreams. The reminiscence of Jack Kerouac traveling paired with the safety of a well-laid-out route and a steady income. She even said she'd come with me. As a writer, she could do her work from anywhere, and she said that to see the landscape and the ability to have her official bounce board for ideas, which was me, driving by her side, would be the ultimate remedy for writer's block. After all, she was the one who inspired me to pen this story. I would read anything she put in front of me. She had an imagination that rivaled Stephen King and a voice that sucked you in so deep that you forgot you were reading printer paper. She imagined us going gray in that big old cab. But that was only one of our dreams that wasn't going to come true. What good does cancer ever do? No, seriously. As people, we learn lessons from the harm we do and the diseases we get. Don't want to catch pneumonia? Bundle up when you go outside into an icy blizzard. Don't want type 2? Don't eat your weight in sugar. But what do you blame when you hear that breast cancer diagnosis? Or when you see her so sick from chemo that she can barely stop puking even though there's nothing left in her system? Because she wasn't even one of those death acceptees who decided to go out with her hair and her dignity. Despite them finding the cancer too late, and them telling us our chances were really slim. All she wanted to do was live. I was 22 when she died, and the only reaction anyone ever expected from me was to get out of Dodge. And that's exactly what I did. Natalie had still been in college when I breezed through my certifications for my CDL, but I sat on the job applications because, for the first time since I could remember, I didn't feel like leaving our town. Natalie was always pestering me, never understanding why I still kept my fry cook job from high school, instead of starting my trek on that long open road. I came up with every excuse to tell her, besides the truth, that I was waiting for us to be able to do it together. The morning after the funeral, I packed a small bag before daylight even broke. Everything I threw in it was essential and basic except for one thing. A small, rainbow-spotted stuffed cat. It always sat on my left pillow since Natalie won it from me at a local carnival early on in our courtship. It was a cheetah or a leopard. I could never really tell the difference. Small enough to fit in my backpack, but bright enough that you could never miss it. Like a Lisa Frank wet dream. It was her goal to win me a prize that night, despite her being such a suck shot, aiming and throwing at anything. But when I saw that rainbow cutie, my eyes had outed me, and she was determined. I had watched her develop an athletic skill over the course of just a couple of hours. From first day at Little League to hitting the board every once in a while. Despite me telling her all evening that she didn't need to win me anything, my eyes lit up as the carney handed me that stupid cat, and I realized that's all she wanted. And we kissed for the first time under the string lights of the Ducky Pond booth. The passenger side seatbelt could barely squeeze the tiny cat into place, but the little plastic-eyed cutie stayed snug the whole drive. I was going on a road trip. Natalie and I had discussed the major routes and how exactly we wanted to see this country. But the only trail she initially suggested was the historical Route 66, which she had seen in a themed PacSun magazine ad from her youth. It hurt to break it to her that the highway had been decommissioned decades ago and was only in remnant pieces across the country. But now, on that foggy morning, without a map or a plan, I found myself driving northwest of my Texas town to the closest mouth of the route I could swing onto, to take the longest, most scenic route around 66. And I talked to Natalie the whole time. Is that weird? When I flew from station to station on that open road, when the radio static was the only thing besides the sound of my truck that comforted me in the black of the early morning, I started talking to her. I talked about everything and tried to imagine what she'd say in response. Natalie, I haven't planned for you not being in my future, I said, breaking the silence of a headlight-lit desert road in Arizona. The memory of her Ohio accent and her smart-ass vocal fry filled my head like a crystal bell.
Just because I disappeared doesn't mean your future did. There are parts of this country that aren't going away you still need to see.
I could see her saying. It was a little ironic that I decided to venture a highway that actually was disappearing from neglect and dismantling. I glanced at the glassy eyes of the cat reflecting the dim LEDs of my dashboard radio. Because I found myself in deep conversation with Natalie, that was the night that I wasn't paying attention and took the wrong exit. I thought I was making a pit stop, but instead found myself in a wall-less desert where the only breaks in the endless sand were occasional rock formations and a horizon of mountain peaks against the ethereal backdrop of a star-polluted sky. Getting more panicked by the minute as my phone displayed no service and I kicked myself for never picking up a map. My eyes had finally landed on the first modicum of civilization I had seen in an hour. A dark and desolate vintage bullet train diner in the middle of nowhere. Now, mind you, there was no real reason to stop and get out of my truck. Even several yards away, I could tell it was a relic of a different time. A for sale sign with a 7-digit phone number marking its old age just as much as the face of the structure itself. It was what reminded me of the third and final main reason I really wanted to be a long-haul truck driver. The pie. When I pictured the life, I imagined the various truck stops and roadside attractions I'd get to visit on my travels. Quaint diners in the center of one-stoplight towns where you could get pancakes that tasted like mom's, gift shops filled with useless souvenirs you couldn't get anywhere else, and giant balls of yarn. But as I spanned New Mexico, I began to realize that everywhere I expected a 50-year-old truck stop to be, it was replaced with brand new brochure kiosks or big box retailers that had freshly steamrolled a town's history to plunk down chain fast food. After Natalie's death, in an article I read online about how Elon Musk planned to turn long-haul rigs into self-driving robots by the time I reached middle age, this new realization was beginning to look like another nail in the coffin of my dreams. I was lost in a lot of ways that night when I got out of my truck and gazed up at the dingy chrome diner against the constellation shining brightly above. I circled the place, peering in windows at the dusty, discarded interior of old leather booths and unworking ice machines left behind. I laid on my hood a while, staring at the structure before drifting away under that heavenly canopy to sleep off the rest of the dark hours. Daylight finally found me my exit back onto the highway. My road trip took a little over a week to wrap up, driving in circles around Middle America, sleeping in my uncomfy cab in the occasional seedy motel, as I worked my way through the grief that weighed me down like a lead coat. I felt light on the road, like the highway gave me wings to glide on. And when I got back to Texas, the stagnant drudge of life as usual, only without Natalie, I couldn't stick around much longer. I made the trek to Arizona several times with the picture of that diner looping in my brain. What was so weird about it was that I never could pin it down on a map. In fact, I thought I'd lost it forever trying to recognize mile markers, landmarks, or existing signs. The only signal of hope I had was an outdated chewing gum billboard that I pointed out to Cataly, the nickname I gave to the stuffed cheetah version of my dead partner, while we waxed on life in the middle of the night months ago. As soon as I saw it, my mind started to wander. Tears filled my eyes, obstructing the road, so I turned my newly installed Bluetooth connector up to drown out my thoughts and lose concentration. It was only then that I eventually snapped back to reality, registering that I was on the same desolate path to my destination. And in the newly discerning daylight, I was able to see the old chrome glinting from a mile away. I had already spent months roaming the Southwest for something like this, a little more accessible and a little less out of commission. But it was like a modern extinction of old and stylish diners that were neither up for sale nor already replaced with a Denny's. It was the longest shot in the world, but I dialed that 7-digit number with the new local area code once I got out of the signalless desert. To my surprise, the ringtone resulted in a modern recorded response.
Hello, this number is forwarded to the offices of Jed Goodman Real Estate. Leave your name and number at the tone and we will respond to your inquiry during the office hours.
Long story short, the abandoned property was grandfathered into the new generation of the real estate company. No other agent nor even the government cared to move on the sale nor demolition of this sitting train in the middle of nowhere. And I got it for an absolute steal, which only was made up by the thousands of dollars I poured into getting the place up and running. The first year was an endless shit show. I spent 8 whole months gutting the old plumbing and wiring to get the place up to code, installing brand new stoves, hoods, and facilities, and finally restoring the dining room to its original cherry black and white glory. I poured an entire calendar year of my life and all of my savings, business loans, and generous PayPal donations from friends to turn this chrome box into my financial future. And when I say I did it all with my bare hands, I very well mean that. I tried to hire outside help several times, but no one could really wrap their heads around exactly where my new establishment was. Some of them may very well be searching the sand on an eternal road trip in this strange part of the country. That said, I expected my almost figurative location to pack a possible punch to my bottom line, but I was willing to cross that little bridge when I came to it to have my own little slice of heaven. What I didn't count on was the diner being haunted. Now, I only say haunted because it's really the only word I have. Other adjectives I've entertained are mystical, supernatural, unearthly, spooky. Sure, there were a few times my toolbox went missing from where I put it last, only to be sitting in the strangest corner of the place. But I had always chalked it up to me being deliriously overworked. It wasn't until my doors were open to the public that I really started to notice something was up. Beaming up to my glistening metal fortress, I figuratively cut the ribbon to 9 Lives Diner. I toyed with many names as I was painting the interior walls and laying down the new checkered linoleum, as Cataly supervised my progress from a seat on the breakfast counter. That perfect name hit me like a ton of breeze blocks and stuck there like wallpaper paste. And as a finishing touch to my hospitality, I sat Cataly on the hostess podium, adorned with a wallet chain and studded collar from a local pet store so she could always greet my customers when they stumbled in. And those who stumbled in were some of the only customers I got in the beginning. A month into opening my doors, and I hadn't seen one car on that horizon. I had taken out ads in every local paper in the surrounding Arizona cities, but it was looking like this dream was turning into another dead end like my last one. It wasn't until 11 p.m. on a Tuesday that I was about to close up shop when I saw headlights pierce the darkness. A young guy and girl in their early 20s entered my new glass doors like they had arrived at the Taj Mahal. Their expressions of relief and gratitude shone through their young, sun-baked faces, bloodshot eyes, and feeble postures. I almost thought they were on drugs until the girl spoke up when she saw me. "Oh my God. Hello. Hi. I've been driving in the desert for half a day. Your place is a lifesaver," she said breathlessly as she passed Cataly's podium and fumbled towards my counter, her energy-sapped boyfriend following zombie-like in a dirty red shirt and cargo shorts behind her. "Can I use your phone?" I was so happy to see other human beings that I was working hard to contain my beaming grin. "I have the next best thing," I mentioned unassuredly, and plopped down my CB radio in front of her. It was one of the first things I brought into the diner when I started tearing the old shack up. I knew I needed some kind of communication to the outside world despite no landlines newer than the 1950s reaching my neck of the woods. And to be quite honest, the radio made me feel like I had a bit of my old dream still in my back pocket. I flicked it on for her and dialed the only channel I knew. The most local police station. They were some 40 minutes away from the quickest route I ever took off the highway, but they were familiar with me and my little hole in the desert since the time my pickup crapped out and I was stranded. If it wasn't for some of the cop positions being filled with Native American descendants with a deeper knowledge of this land beyond any of the white or Mexican people who tried to find this place, they'd probably have been stranded with me too. "The police?" the suntanned sister asked. "I was just hoping to call my parents. I've been driving," she said as her eyelids began to flutter as she clutched the bar stool behind her, swaying on her feet. Both her silent partner and I reached out for her shoulders to steady her as she tried to regain balance. "Hey," I guided her into her chair. "When was the last time you ate anything?" "How long ago was Tuesday night?" She laughed weakly. I poured 2 tall glasses of water, which she took gratefully, gulping down both hers and her boyfriend's to my surprise. I set my menu in front of them. "Pick anything. On the house," I said, going against every rule of business and financial strain I was in. "Build up your strength, and then I can give you directions on how to make it out of here." "That is too kind of you. I do have money, though. I wouldn't want to take advantage of a small business." She put down a crisp 20 from inside the pocket of her cut-off jeans. "And I'm dying for a cheeseburger and fries. And a coffee." I allowed the smile to stretch its legs as I took her cash and poured her joe. "Coming right up," I said as I turned to go and fire up the griddle. "And how about for the mister?" I shouted over my shoulder, leaving the dining room. "What was that?" the girl shouted back. "What's your boyfriend having?" I said before turning back to the kitchen window out to my main floor. I saw the girl sitting alone. "He find the bathroom?" "Who are you talking about?" The girl was staring at me, her voice bordering on hostility. My eyes quickly covered my dining room floor to see no trace of the guy. But before I could utter a word of further inquiry, the CB radio kicked a laugh.
Chrissy, don't get mad at her. She's just doing her job.
At this, I cocked an eyebrow at the orphan transmission, probably from a caravan making their own late-night trip out on 66. The girl, on the other hand, had two bulging eyes and a gaping mouth directed at my radio. When I noticed, I tried to speak again, but she bolted out my front door before I could utter a question. Instinctively, I ran after her, concerned for her wavering well-being. She got in her car, tears streaming as she fired up her engine. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," I said. "Girl, you almost fainted in my dining room. I think you should take a second to tell me what's going on."
Why don't you tell me what's going on?
She cry-screamed into her steering wheel as I watched her begin to bawl loudly through her open window. As quickly as she could, she tried to calm herself, wiping her tears and catching her breath.
I must be even more delirious than I thought. God, this desert can really zap you.
I was still looking on dumbfounded until she finally pulled herself together to say,
The voice on the radio just now really sounded like my big brother. I don't know if I would have freaked out so much if it didn't say my name.
She breathed once more, a yoga-trained intake and release to calm herself before she said her last.
His name was Kevin. You know, maybe you should even consider getting some security grills for the inside of your windows. The gangs around this part of AZ are pretty ruthless.
She trailed off without gathering the strength to spell it out for me. "You got apple pie?" she said to break the silence. I perked up through my still ever-present confusion and said, "Yes." "Can I have a slice to go?"
"Maybe two," she said tiredly, "and keep the change."
I went back inside to pack up the uncut face of that day's apple pie and took it out to her car window along with my somewhat figurative directions to getting out of this desert. She offered an exhausted but genuine "thank you" before she put the car into reverse to leave my parking lot. As she pivoted, I saw the familiar face of her road partner, now sitting in her back seat. He turned and smiled at me for the first time since he had gotten there, displaying a fresh bullet wound I hadn't seen before, perpetually oozing blood onto his already red shirt. I was glad Chrissy didn't turn around to look at me at that moment because she would have been convinced I saw a ghost. After that night, it seemed like some sort of small curse of mine had been broken. More wandering and lost travelers started stumbling into my restaurant, all on a sliding scale of distress and relief as they found my oasis in the desert. By week 6, I had my first regular. Hamish was a fully grayed older gentleman of maybe 70, with kind but wizened eyes. The only reason I knew his name was because it was sewn into a patch on an old but presentable mechanic's jumpsuit he wore whenever I saw him. I imagine he patroned my establishment right before opening the garage door on his own every day. The only thing I feared about Hamish was his possible onset dementia. Hamish ordered the same thing every day: black coffee and a Texas omelet with rye toast on the side. A respectable choice, I'd say myself, if I wasn't the type to get sick of eating the same thing every day. On the first day I served him, he was already busy behind the morning newspaper, drifting his eyes over the headlines lazily before slowly turning the big rustling pages. I came over to refill his coffee when I asked, "What's the news today, mister?" Hamish barely flicked his eyes in my direction before responding.
Wildcats don't have a fire engine's chance in hell making it to the World Series this year.
I knew nothing about baseball, so I smiled politely and forced a kind but probably disingenuous as I finished topping off his coffee. About to walk away, I watched as Hamish struggled with 3 packets of sugar as he tried to tear the stack at once, sending little crystals everywhere, exclaiming,
"Aw, hell!"
But by the time I had come back with a wet rag, Hamish had already gone off to his day job, his bill and change tucked under his now lonely saucer. In the coming week, I got to learn a little bit more about sports when a group of high schoolers came into my place, donned in dirty matching local league t-shirts and ball caps of their professional team of choice. I tried to play it cool and relate to my patrons when I came over with their food. Too bad about them Wildcats. Maybe eventually they'll get to the World Series. They tried to retain their polite and grateful demeanors until the guy with the red ball cap, brandishing a mean-eyed snake, spoke up.
College baseball can't play in the World Series. Aw, hell.
I heard Hamish exclaim over his spilled sugar again from his regular spot 2 booths away. That night, when I got back to my tiny apartment I rented not half a mile from the bubblegum billboard, I Googled Hamish's favorite team to learn that the Wildcats were the major league team in the 1950s, only to be replaced by the Arizona Diamondbacks, or something like that. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize the order, the jumpsuit, the fact that he responded to any question of mine with,
Wow, Cassio have a fire engine's chance in hell making it to the World Series this year.
was not a product of an aging brain or a man of routine, but a spirit on a time loop who picked my diner to haunt. But don't think for a minute that my fine establishment was your average kind of haunted house. Eventually, as the diner started to generate some actual business, I had to hire actual employees. Franklin was one of my first fry cooks / pie bakers, a bucket of nerves paired with a basket of compassion. He was a nerdy thing who desperately stole glances of the pretty girls in the dining room when he rang the bell in the order window. But he was my most efficient employee. That is, until he started dropping body parts onto my stovetops. Yeah, that's what I said. He eventually had to explain to me that he had a bad run-in with the local gang of witches after he stalled to pay up on a potent love potion they fronted the guy. I had so much to learn in my odd situation on top of being a new business owner. Apparently, covens aren't as aggressive and showy as the kind of neighborhood gangs you might have grown up with. They don't need to be. They mind their own in their twinkle light-lit trailer parks, quietly mixing their brews until some reckless mortal wrongs them. Then the punishment simply appears. Franklin would lose feet or fingers on a daily basis, only to have them grow back over a matter of days. But not until the next appendage fell to the ground with a thump and a roll. I felt many of Franklin's ears stuck in my floor drain. He said it would only last until he was able to save up enough to pay his witch. So I took pity on the poor schmuck, and would sneak a couple extra dollars into his tip split every week so he could stop dropping kneecaps under my oven. But I can't say his curse didn't come without its bright sides. It was a particularly grueling day at the diner as Cataly watched our hostess fill the dining room to half capacity, which was a record for me at the time and a steady escalation in business I was still trying to get used to. I had gained another regular table of customers who I sometimes wished I could deny service to when I felt like it. It was a family of 3 with an ice cream guzzling kid, an anal retentive dad who could never keep the kid sitting still, always letting him have the ice cream, and a cold but quiet mom. Being the family member for which I had to lean in to hear her low-whispered orders most of the time, you'd think that she would be the best of the bunch, but the woman's chilly demeanor didn't stop at her formal and unemotional whisper.
I'll have a club sandwich with fries, no bacon, mayo, or tomato, a piece of cherry pie, and a fresh cup of coffee. And when I say a fresh cup of coffee, I mean I will know if the pot has been burning on that coil for any longer than 15 minutes.
I cocked my head up from my notepad to see her staring directly into my soul with a half-filled cup of black coffee held out for me to take.
Fresh cup.
She reminded again, followed quickly with,
And work on your posture, dear. Proper presentation would probably help you get more tips.
At that, I straightened up from my leaning position I took specifically to hear her ASMR'd order and tried my best to look composed under the bubbling frustration I felt brewing on my way to the kitchen. Oh, hell. Hey, Franklin, I said as the swinging door closed behind me. If you happen to replace her missing mayo with spit on the club sandwich, just saying, I wouldn't be mad. Franklin offered a weak laugh without turning his head to me.
Aye, aye, Captain.
I was cleaning the milkshake machine 20 minutes later when I heard a scream erupt from the other side of my counter. I turned towards my favorite family of 3, the Ice Queen literally clutching her strand of pearls. I looked down at the only evident subject of her distress to a forkful missing from her cherry pie and a dark irised eyeball staring up at her from under the lattice crust. Astounded, the only reaction I had was to whip around to my kitchen staff, where I got a full view of Franklin's face for the first time that day. A terrified, gaping mouth, and an equally cavernous hole on the right side of his brow where his second brown eye should have been. Mortified, he slapped a hand on his empty socket before he caught my glance. I myself was suppressing a laugh as I tried to look stern and serious, but ended up cracking a secret smile and winking in his direction before going over to do damage control and offer the family free ice cream for life. Another bad review. Bad reviews were something I got regularly, but as you'd suspect, they're not really the average type of bad review. Eyeballs in the pie, disembodied voices talking to customers through the bathroom stalls. I once stayed up all night Googling how to hack into Yelp to take down bad reviews, but fell asleep reading the outlandishly entertaining r/bad reviews for Starbucks. Turns out, these creepy happenings weren't as bad for business as I thought. I didn't consider how popular a haunted diner could be. Even those who claimed they didn't believe a lick of what they thought was a cheap, albeit creative publicity stunt said they'd attempt a visit. But really, only the truest adventurers made it to me to tell the tale anyways. When I saw the comments claiming my restaurant didn't exist and they couldn't find it, I started pasting the directions everywhere they'd let me post. Start on I-40. Look for the old billboard advertising bubble bucket gum, and then stop paying attention. Do anything to keep your mind off of where you're going. Daydream about your last best meal or the last time you had sex. Blast your radio and have the smallest karaoke party ever. Or start a deep conversation with whoever you're with, like I did, and you'll find me. When the reviews, accompanied by my crystal clear directions, started to spread across the internet, I began to notice my parking lot filling up before I'd even arrive early in the morning to open up shop. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that this would be the fate of me and my little hole in the world. I unlocked the glass doors and bent down to the colorful cat standing guard at my podium. Look sharp, Nat. Looks like we've got a big day ahead of us. Doors open wasn't the only time I was talking to Natalie anymore, though. When business started to really pick up, I assumed my mind would start to become occupied by the hustle of employees, customers, inventory, and taxes. But like taxes, death was still an ever-looming subject in my life. And when the cooks and waitstaff would trickle out at the end of a long day, I found myself sweeping the floors and wiping down the booze as I recounted to Natalie the highs and lows of my day. Nat, did I tell you about the shootout in the freezer today? Looked like a mob kingpin from Prohibition and some weaselly little underling who got in his way. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys about the walk-in freezer. Terrell, my lead grill master, called it the Crossroads freezer because it's as if all weather, time periods, and deaths like to play out the past next to my cold cuts and butter pads. It was the last place I even imagined the weird stuff to reach. I built the gosh dang walk-in, but this land seems to have its way with anything put on it. I've seen settlers asking natives for directions beside my soup storage. I've heard Great Gatsby music playing out of my tuna fish canister. I thought 2 of my employees were hooking up in the coldest place you could think of to get some privacy, only to find a waitress in her original 50s uniform moaning over the touches of her night manager. Franklin got so scared at a dust-riddled cowboy pointing his gun at him that he refuses to be the one to fetch new bins of chicken when we run out. I always broke down the daily events to Natalie, turning her little cat avatar towards me so I could pretend to read the blank expression on her furry face. On the loneliest nights, I would turn the CB radio on and dial to the low static. I would divulge to Natalie and pause, genuinely stop, and desperately wait for an answer as the snowy, cruel static buzzed steadily on.
Is it true you bake body parts into pie?
An excited customer asked with a nudge to his buddy as I poured him a coffee at the counter. Not anymore, I said, glancing out of the corner of my eye to a fully intact and debt-free fry cook stretching his arms safely as he waited for eggs to fry. I left the adventurous customer confused and wide-eyed as I moved down the counter to a sweet and prim-looking elderly lady adorned with expensive-looking, albeit somewhat dated professional attire, who had just sat down on my stool. Hi there, ma'am. You want to start with something to drink, or are you ready to order?
I'll have a cup of hot tea if you don't mind. And perhaps a slice of your pecan pie a little later,
she said politely.
Sans the eyeballs, please.
Will do, I laughed as I arranged her tea accessories. Sounds like you've come a long way to my neck of the woods. Passing through? Here on vacation? Although that would be quite a strange vacation, I said in a ramble.
No, actually, my husband and I are traveling for business,
she answered.
But I have a feeling you hate small talk.
I paused, furrowing my brow. It was an innocent enough assumption, but it was specific enough that I'm sure she saw the split-second falter in my demeanor. I composed. Small talk just kind of comes with the territory. But you can talk to me about something more fun, like where have you had the best cup of coffee or tea in America, or tell me about the best business deal you and your husband ever made, if that's not too confidential.
Well, believe it or not, there's a tiny French shack on the outskirts of New Orleans that has tea and biscuits that could rival back home,
the old woman disclosed. Is that right? I said, genuinely tickled about her secret tea hut.
I'm from right across the Mississippi. Must have missed that one. And my husband and I are in real estate,
she said more matter-of-factly. I almost snorted as I poured her tea. Not too many buildings to buy up around here, but I guess it would be a good place to break ground, if this area wasn't so hard to find.
You seem to be doing well,
she countered.
Yeah, but
it wasn't one of those build and they will come type of situations. This was a long process, a lot of sweat, tears, and money. But it's mine, you know.
Yes, I'm familiar with the feeling.
She stared pensively into her tea.
My husband and I built our business from less than nothing. Debt, threat of eviction, and watching our children starve slowly. We learned the basics from books at the library and knew no one in the business aside from the rival corporate agents. But we did have each other.
My heart warmed at her story. I was never one for misery porn, but to know someone went through so much turmoil and came out on the other side to have what seemed like a long-term successful business with her husband, it was nice to think that I could have at least some of that by the time my hair turned gray.
My husband was a whiz at the finances and all the complicated contractual jargon that helped us keep above board. And I was the face, the saleswoman, so to speak. The perfect team.
She pulled an old photo from her wallet, a white outline picture from the 70s of a much younger version of the woman sitting in front of me, and a similarly aged and dapper man posing beside her in front of a beautiful and grand house.
At first, when he died, I honestly wasn't sure how I could do it all by myself. But in this world, I found there are ways to turn any misfortune around.
I grimaced again as I stared confused at her story as the food bell and broke me out of my trance. I went to deliver my customer's breakfast before I got back to the patiently waiting lady, sipping her cooling tea at the counter. I think I missed something, I said, puzzled. I thought you said you were traveling with your husband. Did you meet someone new in the business after your husband passed?
Oh, no,
she said casually, holding up her ring finger.
I've only ever walked down the aisle once. We've worked our way through all the anniversary gift themes, save for quite a few in the middle.
She seemed barely fazed by my perplexed face I wore when she looked down at her ring and continued.
Do you think that this is the only place where such miraculous things can happen?
My brow unbunched. She met my eyes again, but the demeanor of a sweet and unassuming old lady had relaxed. I pressed my tongue to the side of my mouth and threw my towel into the sink below the counter in front of her. I put on my big girl voice, though still speaking low enough as to not draw attention from my customers. Seeing as there's no kind of structure or business for miles around this restaurant, can I assume that you are currently on the clock? She opened her mouth to answer, but I interrupted, because this hunk of metal sat here for decades. So the first year that I make anything of it, The first time in my life that I feel like I've succeeded at something. You think you can come in here and just assume I hand it over? Well, that's obviously not how business works now, does it? She explained. I didn't come into your lovely establishment assuming you'd just hand over anything for any less than a fair price. I chortled one last time before asking. And what amount of money do you think would equate to a lifetime of business? Not all deals are monetary. When I rolled my eyes, they landed to the front of the store, where something made the bottom of my stomach drop out before my brain could even register what it was. I ran over to the podium, where my forever business partner sat every day as the face of 9 lives. The colorful cat was missing from her post. I scanned all around the vestibule and into the immediate parking lot, under the surrounding tables where my customers watched puzzled, even in and under the heavy podium, until I noticed something. I ran my fingers around the corner of the piece of furniture where I drilled an early hole for the wallet chained to anchor cattily down. None of it was there, not her collar nor chain, and my fingers grazed solid, unadulterated wood where the hole should have been. Just then, my front door chimed directly behind me, forcing me to turn and let someone past. I was faced with the man from the old lady's photograph. Not the man in present day, not his son, but the man exactly as he was in that desaturated Polaroid ripoff. He barely acknowledged me as he spotted his partner and walked on, taking a seat next to her before leaning in for a tender kiss. As my brain mixed like biscuit batter on an early Sunday morning, she turned from the counter to look at me. For a split second, I thought I caught a shadow in her eyes, a dark, glossy glint of black that seemed to stretch from tear duct to outer corner before she quickly blinked the blackness away. To have Natalie back would be the ultimate reward at the end of a separate, deeply buried dream that I barely allowed myself to entertain because of how fruitless and painful I knew that kind of longing to be. Was this a mortal deal being offered from a powerful witch? Or did the devil itself pay a visit to my little business in the middle of nowhere? And what would I trade to have Natalie breathing, smiling, and laughing in front of me again? I hope you enjoyed that spine-tingling tale, friends. Leave it to me to include both pie and ghosts in the one story I write a year. This week's mashup included story time and filmmaking and acting and filmmaking. Still don't know what I call it without looking at it. And I got to stretch my legs into the supernatural, super cute genre of storytelling. In your honest opinion, what did you guys think of the story? What did you guys think of the entire ambiance of it? Were you strapped in tight for the entirety of the story? Or did you doze off to sleep to the sounds of my stupendous character creation? Let's see what we are doing next time on the show, which is not this Monday, but next, because this week we're going to be doing some Halloween fun stuff. Tune in live on Saturday. We're going to attempt a live. We're going to just see what happens. And I'm going to be trying some new flavors of classic candies that I've never heard of, never seen, and you're going to get my live review. Again, if I know how to live. Tell me down in the comments, guys, have you thought of your Halloween costume yet? We'll see mine on Friday. Oh my god, a vlog! A vlog during quarantine! So watch me sit in my house and die slowly of loneliness? I hope you're enjoying Halloween as much as I am, despite not even getting to wear a costume anywhere but the internet, but don't we just do it for the pic anyways? While I've got you, let's have a little Night of the Living Unread. and have ourselves a little social seance. I think today I'd like to venture over to my art Instagram, so instead of people saying things about my face, they're saying things about my fake food. First, let's go to my set of 3 brand new fake food hair clips, where I'm modeling exactly how adorable they could possibly be. And Guy Dog 1 says, picked up a set of these for my goddaughter to wear for her birthday, but I love them so much she might have to thumb wrestle me for them. I mean, with how cute these turned out, I wouldn't expect them to be any less than the top prize for a MMA championship. What if I told you the pumpkin pie wasn't real? Apathetic says, lies, maybe. I guess the only way you'd know is if you bought it and I shipped it to you and it rots or it knots in the box. I asked the crowd, what do you like on your fake pizza? And it's not about you, .lfh said, Hawaiian, pineapple, and Canadian bacon. That's how you go international with an Italian pizza pie. Ring that bell for special Friday and Saturday episodes this week, and looking forward to giving you guys a vlog about, I don't know.